My name's Sarah Tack and I work for Hitachi Rail and I'm the Global Safety, Wellbeing and Sustainability Director. So fundamentally what that involves is setting the safety, the wellbeing and the sustainability strategy across the 40 countries that Hitachi Rail operate in. So a mixture of real strategic leadership and also more operational safety, wellbeing and sustainability. So we've just been through a major acquisition and that's amounted in us being dispersed as a team, going through a long periods of uncertainty and change, which for a department that runs and is responsible for really high risk business critical activities, that was something which I wanted to be able to manage and support the teams through to make sure that we had good business continuity throughout what was going to be a really challenging period. Some of the challenges that I found ourselves facing were real uncertainty. So with a major acquisition of a huge company of thousands of people being acquired by another company, communication is absolutely key, but it's also really difficult to coordinate across such a large amount of people. So there was a lot of uncertainty, and I think when there's uncertainty in an organisation, people will either try and come to the conclusions that they think are right, and that can then magnify itself in messages that aren't helpful, possibly aren't accurate, possibly aren't consistent. And I think also one of the other big challenges we had was individuals feeling concerned about their future and also about their teams. And I think when individual managers and leaders are feeling uncertain, it's really challenging for them to effectively motivate their teams and give them the right direction and the security and the clarity that they need. Or really just to explain in a professional way that we don't have the information at the moment, but here's some of the skills that we can focus on to continue that important business continuity and help people to feel effective in their roles, but also safe and healthy in their well-being as well, which is absolutely essential when you're leading teams and you've got big responsibilities. I think one of the other barriers we faced was going into a culture which we weren't familiar with. The previous culture that we'd come from was different. It was owned by a different set of people, a different set of stakeholders, and this was something new that we hadn't experienced before. So I think that was another barrier as well for people. There wasn't that toolkit of practical, pragmatic things that could help a manager communicate, explain. There were no further updates. So it was looking at that kind of practical, pragmatic approach that also, once the course had finished, that we could then call upon and use those tools in the handbook that we were given to help that continuity. I think one of the first and foremost things that I was looking for when I started to discuss the programme with Davina was to give leaders who have incredibly difficult jobs when you're going through a merger or an acquisition some real support, some time dedicated to them, that they could have that hour once a week discussing some of their concerns, some of their challenges, which of course is cathartic, but one of the key things was discussing with Davina, great, we can listen, we can share things, but to have something back in return, which was the toolkit, which was the techniques that were part of the course that we could really focus on. And then also as a group outside of the sessions to work together on. And I think that was one of the biggest things for me, is to help the leaders enhance their well-being, look after their well-being, their coping skills, because of course if they're in a better place, then their teams will be as well, because they can cascade that message and they can have a better resilience than they might without that dedicated time and those tools. The structure and the frequency and the format of the course. It was once a week on a Monday morning at 9 a.m. UK time, and that actually worked really well. The expectation was set very clearly from the start by Davina before we actually had the first session, that this is your time. Let's all commit to it, because the benefit of just 1 hour once a week will be huge. So I think it was really good that the expectation was set, that this isn't something you can swing by if you feel like it. This is a commitment that I've made as a manager and Davina is making with SuperWellness. And the frequency was spot on. You could talk about how your tools, how your techniques had worked, but also I think as importantly, you knew you had that hour together where there was going to be some time which wasn't scripted, which wasn't packed with the agenda, where you could discuss things freely and openly and together as a team that were going through a similar situation. I think if we'd have done it any more frequently, it would have been too much. If we'd have done it any less frequently, there wouldn't have been enough continuity. So I think that 1 hour was fantastic on a Monday morning that we could just dedicate to the programme was absolutely spot on for us. I can't really explain the challenges that we have been through with this acquisition. It has been really challenging, really difficult. And I think for me as the senior director to show some vulnerability, which trust me is not easy, it probably did help people to think if she's struggling, if she's finding it challenging, then it's okay for the rest of us to find it challenging. And I suppose as well, even though it's not easy, the fact that I did open up and I did show some vulnerability made me realise that there is support around for me as well, even at the leadership, even in the leadership role. And yeah, I think then people really did feel a bit more relaxed to talk. And probably when Davina first saw us all staring at her on the screen that first Monday morning, she was like, whoa, this is going to be tough. But I think we did all open up as the time went by. The way it helped to give those kind of mind-shifting techniques, etc., there were some really practical things in there. So in addition, as leaders, we will always listen to our teams. We want to listen to them. We want to allow them to talk through their concerns and how they can deal with those. But I think one of the biggest things it gave us as a team, and especially me, I can talk from personal experience, is one of the techniques that Davina gave us was deciding what is actually in our sphere of control, what is not in our sphere of control. And just by doing something simple, which you would think would be obvious for a relatively intelligent person, but when you're in the thick of dealing with something which is challenging, something which is difficult, it all tends to blur into one. So the fact that we then had those kind of techniques, also just simply things like taking a breath so that you can just rebalance yourself rather than just reacting to challenging, to difficult things, was really effective. And the things that I think we've all taken away from that is things that we wouldn't have done before: breathing, thinking what's in our control, and planning what the week might look like. What was your mindset at the beginning of the week? What was your mindset at the end of the week? And what kind of things might have influenced that? And then you can look back on that, which I do, and reflect and think, right, okay, so could I tweak this? Could I amend that? And just that time to think about those things consciously, rather than the kind of headlight approach that you can have when things are uncertain. Yes, so some of the differences I've noticed since the team completed the course was definitely feeling more able to be honest and open with their teams as well, to explain that perhaps they don't know so much about what's going on, but this is something that you could try that could help you to feel a little bit more in control. I think one of the other things that I didn't expect out of it, which has been really beneficial, is because we were given that dedicated hour for 6 weeks every week, it's made the informal connections between us as a team much more effective. So previously, they may have only contacted one another if they had something transactional and something business related. But now I understand that they're connecting with one another just to talk about how they might be feeling, or what kind of tools and techniques they're using that Davina shared. And also just sometimes to have a laugh, have a smile, which I think we're all very serious people. And I think it's allowed us to say, actually, that's really good use of time. The unquantifiable, better communication, better informal communication, more humour, a definite more positive vibe amongst leaders are all, I think, small early signs of things that are working. I think the challenge now will be to sustain it. I think the value of a refresh, any new skill that you learn, particularly as you get more mature, particularly when you're going through very challenging times, it's not imprinted in you as subconscious behaviour. It's still a learning behaviour. And I think with myself, I will be very tempted a lot of the time to default back to the behaviours I may have had before the course. So I think perhaps to have the option of a monthly check-in, not just because you're going to be checked up on, but it's more, okay, so we're going to have this conversation in 3 weeks' time with Davina. I think it would help to embed it and also know that you had that positive session, because we really enjoyed them. We really look forward to it. So I think that would be a real benefit as well, that bit of continuation. I think one of the most valuable things was the authenticity of the facilitator. It wasn't a particularly standardised corporate approach, and that made it even more valuable. So I think using an organisation such as SuperWellness really added value because they're authentic and they're different to most huge corporate organisations, and that seemed to work really well, and people seem to be very open to that approach. And I think that was really important. Davina's approach was very individual and very effective. If some other organisation was going through a challenging time, I think the things that I would recommend is that we really gained huge value from attending these modules was the amount of precision and bespoke approach to tailoring the course to what we found that was necessary and we thought would be useful. One of the other things which was really valuable is the dedicated time, and I would say even when you've got busy calendars, which everybody has, to dedicate 6 hours over 6 weeks. That time was way outweighed by the benefit, so that giving of time got huge returns. And then I think the other thing which was massively beneficial and I'd recommend to other people considering it is the workbook that stays fresh, helps you to rebalance when you're having difficult times, and helps the programme to sustain and have an enduring effect even when it's finished.